All right, welcome back. I have just returned from Adepticon 2025, where I played in the Alpha Strike doubles event, in the Alpha Strike 350 singles event, and then I also got a little Saga doubles in. Today, I want to talk to you, though, about that Alpha Strike singles event and let you know how that Capellan list I ran did. Spoiler alert, it was really good. If you haven't seen the details on that list, there's a link in the description below, or you can go search in my video feed for that Capellan list that I recently put together and posted. So just a real quick recap. I ran an Orion 1MA, a Charger 3K, a Jingao, a Blackhawk KU, a Thunderer 1L, a Martin's helicopter, a Drillson, two J. Edgars, the machine gun variant, a Partisan that was skilled down to 3, a Tunnel Rat exoskeleton 2, two snipers, and two Swiftwind scout cars that were skilled up to 6. So the event, first off, the event was great. Lots of fun. I think there was over 40 people or close to 40 people playing in the singles event. Lots of cool armies. It was clan invasion. Lots of cool people showed up. And it was a lot of fun, man. It was just Adepticon. If you have not gone, this is my first time going. I don't know why you would go to. If you could only go to one convention in a year and you love mini wargaming, like you have got to go to Adepticon. There's a ton of people there. Go with your friends. Have a great time. Milwaukee was great. I know they moved this year, and it was absolutely fantastic. I, I don't see how I don't go. Living in Minnesota now, I don't see how I don't go every single year. It was that good. The guys from WolfNet put on a great event. The Catalyst guys had great space. I mean, it was all a ton of fun. So we've gone over the list. Now let's talk about our games. We played 5-game qualifier, and then there was a 3-game finals. So the top 8 from the qualifier moved on. And I ran that Capellan list that I just went over. So in game 1, I played Bourbon from the Valhalla Club. Andrew was polite enough to let me grudge match him. Bourbon's a pretty cool guy. I've met him at some other events, but we had never gotten to play. So we thought it would be fun to get a game in of singles. We did play a game. He was with Charles Gideon from the podcasts. Gideon and him played against me and my partner Jamie in the doubles event. And then I got to have another game against Bourbon. And they were some of the best games I played all weekend. The game we played was Stand-Up Fight. Bourbon had like a combination of like super heavy tanks. I want to say it was like 2 Ontos and a Behemoth, and like a smattering of like scout mechs and medium mechs, like lighter medium mechs and scout mechs. And this was a little, this is my first outing with this Capellan list. I wasn't quite sure how it would do, and that combination kind of put me on edge a little bit. I was running for Stand-Up Fight the Charger, the Jingao, the Blackhawk, the Thunder, the Orion, the Drillson, and then I threw the Tunnel Rat on the Blackhawk KU. And I was worried about being caught in the open with all this heavy long-range damage and then being outflanked and outmaneuvered by his mediums and lights. So the way that when I was putting the train out, he was setting train up. The way I wanted to put the train out was to basically have a double hill for me to hide behind that wasn't too big, so I could skirt back and forth and kind of take shots where needed on units. I also had like a little support hill, I would say, off to my left that was more in my backfield. So if I had to come out around that double hill, I could still get protection. And then I did my best to keep the center of the board as wide open as possible. And the reason I did that is since it was Stand-Up Fight and I didn't need to go get objectives, I wanted to kind of make sure that if he was going to come to me, then he would have to do it across the open. And if he was to stay back and just take my shots from my mediums, then he had limited cover in between that to close the ground, and then his tanks would have to expose themselves up on a hill. We had some hills kind of in his backfield, and then those tanks would be in the open. So I would be getting cover while he would be limiting his cover, especially if he decided to come out and after me. So, and that's essentially what happened. I did this dance back and forth across the hill, that double hill, and was just trying to whittle down and pick on one of them heavy tanks every single turn. And I was balled up enough that he didn't really want to come into my little castle with his lights and his mediums. But they were not, these lights and mediums, they dealt quite a bit of damage. One of them had TSM, if I remember right. And I wasn't willing to come out and just take all that. Eventually what happened was after probably 3 or 4 turns of this back and forth, I was able to finally get rid of one of the tanks and then whittle another one down. And then I just Kool-Aid manned right around the corner with everything took out his other 2 tanks, and then really started hammering on his lights and mediums pretty solidly. There was a point where he had me backed up behind that hill, and I was really worried about him getting rear shots. But he had, and this is when I go back to terrain placement, like it's really important to really think about what you do for terrain. He had kind of thrown this lava piece behind my double hill, and I mean, I think his intent was to like limit my movement. But what it inadvertently did is it allowed me to back up my mechs, and I put the back of my mechs to that lava, so his mechs couldn't get around and behind me to shoot me in the rear, if that makes sense. So instead of using like the board edge or a hill or a double hill to protect my rear, I used this lava pit because his mechs couldn't go in the lava pit. And it's actually a pretty good sized piece of lava. It was probably, I would bet 6 inches across at its widest. So it was like, it was not one of these like small little pieces of like area terrain that are actually like flat and you can see through, right? And then lava, you can't, your mech doesn't want to go in there. So I ended up coming out. I ended up hitting him really hard. He kind of saw the writing on the wall, and then it was on like Donkey Kong. We formed this, and you'll see the picture on the screen here. We formed this Congo line. He kept jumping. He'd jump behind a mech. I'd move a mech up. He'd jump behind another one of my mech. I'd move my mech up. So we jokingly called it the battletech human centipede, where we were exhaust to cockpit all the way down the line, where he was trying to get rear shots but ended up giving up rear shots. I think even my tunnel rat infantry got in on the action and got a crit. Ended up being a lot of fun for the game, but I did end up tabling poor Bourbon. I apologize, Bourbon, if you're listening to this. And I ended up scoring 4 points to, I believe he scored 0 points. Maybe he scored 1. I'm not really sure. But I scored 4, and I did end up tabling him. So at the end of round 1, I ended up in 10th place, which is pretty good. A lot of guys did very well in stand-up fight. A lot of the top players did. They scored max points, and then got very high MOV on top of that. So I ended up in that 10th place range at the end of that round. So in round 2, we went into Domination. I was playing this guy Michael from St. Louis. He was a pretty new, or not want to say inexperienced battletech player, Alpha Strike player, but it sounded when we talked that he was pretty new. But I will tell you what, he was not an inexperienced gamer. So new to battletech, not new to gaming, and very intelligent player. He was running this heavier list that had a smattering of some like mediums and lights. Not really much in the way of vehicles though. And I think we talked afterwards. I think this kind of hurt his list a little bit, but essentially he had something like, I think it was like a grasshopper and a thunderbolt and a axeman, a hatchet man. I can't remember what else he had in there. Warhammer, a charger, a locust, things like that. So that's what he was bringing. I brought to Domination the list that I had on the video. So it was a Ryan, Jingal, Blackhawk, Thunderer, a Partisan, Drillson, and a J. Edgar. So the way that the train shook out was I kind of put a double hill. He put a hill like kind of on his half, or I put a hill on his half, and then I double hilled it up so that line of sight to the center objective from his perspective was blocked. And then I started putting hills out like on my side to cover my approach and my move up, and then suddenly found that my left flank was completely open, and all we had on that same lava board again were these like spires or spiky like train pieces. And so what I did was I didn't want him to be able to draw a line of sight to that my rear objective if I had to put something there. And so I offset and staggered the terrain every like 8 inches or so that he couldn't see down, because these were small pieces of terrain, right? And there are these like spikes and spires, and they have gaps that you can see through. And what I wanted to be able to do was make sure he couldn't see. Oh, I remember. I think he put like that same lava piece like in front of that so that I couldn't put a hill or something to block line of sight. So then up the board, I staggered those pieces to kind of give myself some line of sight blocking terrain. The game opened up, and it was pretty tight, to be honest with you. The whole game was pretty tight. It was back and forth. There were a couple of turns where if the dice just went in his favor a little more, especially when it came to my J. Edgar and Drillson, like I think he would have beat me pretty handily. But the game just kept rolling forward, and he had sent like a ball of like 4 heavy mechs up his right flank, so up my left flank. And then he had just sent like a charger, a locust up my right flank to try to go for an objective. And then he's planted a hatchetman on the backboard with a warhammer. I think it was a warhammer in the backfield, kind of protecting his back two objectives, like kind of planted in the middle. When I saw him do that, I hyper focused on his right flank to try to take out that lighter stuff that didn't have a lot of damage output. And my plan was to pin his heavies around the middle and then push up the right and take the fourth objective. It worked pretty good, but I bled a lot doing it. He had some shots that really just nuked. I think he had narc that just really nuked some of my heavies. And I had a hard time connecting with like some of his vehicles and his tanks on that right side. Or he didn't have vehicles. So like the hatchetman, the locust, the charger, there were a couple terms where I was pretty confident I was going to take him out and I didn't. And it really slowed down my progress. But eventually it kind of rolled on him and I was able to get up that side. And then I was using the J. Edgar and the Drillson to really put pressure on his second back objective to draw shots away. I tried to bait him several times throughout this game, and he was having none of it, like at all. I really tried hard to get his Warhammer to commit to destroying my charger. I believe it was my charger was pretty beat up. And so I kind of threw him out there and exposed him in a way that would have required the Warhammer to come out of his position. And I was hoping that he would do that in response. And then if he did that in response, I think it was his hatchet man was kind of out of position that would have allowed me to close with my Drillson and my J. Edgar and take him out and grab the objective. And if that would have happened in that moment, this was like very early on in the game, like it would have been game over. I would have popped 4 at like the end of 3. But he absolutely did not fall for it. And because he didn't fall for it, like it became like a real serious knife fight. But eventually, the game came down to one die roll, and this is what happened. I got on 4 objectives, right, in a turn. So I was on his back one. I had my 2. His grasshopper was like 2 inches shy of getting on one of my back objectives, and I had no bodies to cover it. Like when I say no bodies, I mean 0 bodies to cover it. So he was 2 inches away from that, and I had like 1 or 2 mechs on the middle objective that were pretty beat up. And he had pushed his axeman into that space. And I killed the axeman like with like just what I needed to kill him. And then he killed one of my other mechs off the center. And my last mech was on the center, surviving with like 2 hit points. And time ran out. If we had gone, well, no, time didn't run out. I had scored 4. And so the game ended. But we were pretty close to running time. But if we had started another turn, like if I was unable to, like if his axeman had survived in that middle objective and was contesting, so I only controlled 3, the next turn he wins the game because I had no bodies left to hold the center, and his grasshopper could have got on that third objective, and then like 2 minutes later we would have run out of time. So it was a super, super tight game, super, super close, but like probably one of the most like tactically challenging and fun games I had. It was really good, and he's a very, very good player, and I think you should be like super happy with how he played in that game. Like you said, it was the whole time was like on edge, and it was really, really good, like just down the line. So I ended up scoring 4 points in that one. He scored 1, and at the end of that round, I was in 3rd place. So game 3, I played a game of Capture the Flag against Mark. Mark had a super cool list. So he had even had this like little pamphlet and booklet, but he had painstakingly collected all the old metal unseen mechs, and he had this like booklet that like showed all of them, and then that was basically the army he was running, and it was super awesome. Super awesome army. I think I have a picture. I know I didn't take a lot of pictures, so there's not a lot up on screen, but I took a picture of his army, I believe. And so it was like meticulously painted with stars, and it was just super cool. And he even like gave you a new plastic mech that was painted like his army, but it was supposed to be like one of the unseens. And it was great. It was a super cool army. And he was super friendly guy, like probably one of the most friendly players I played all weekend, and like super positive throughout the whole thing, and like laughing and having a good time. And like I even complained about how we couldn't find victors, and he was like, let me text all my buddies back home and see who's got victors, and is like in the process of like hunting victors down for me, which is like super dope of him. But so he had this unseen list. I recognized from the get-go that this list was fast, but not super fast. So he had a lot of jumping mechs that were like TMM2 and TMM3. And those mechs, they're fast, but they're not fast enough to get on the objective turn one. And so what I did is I built a double hill on his half of the board, kind of past the center flag point, to force him to have to come over it. And he either has to walk up that hill and slow down, or he has to jump up that hill and then his shots aren't as good, right? So I put that hill there. We put another hill kind of to my right, and then he put woods to my left. And then I had a little castle for my partisan, little castle fort to block my base, the line of sight to my base, and then something that my partisan could get up on top of to shoot, right? So my list had 2 Swift Winds, a Drillson, a Partisan, 2 J. Edgars. I believe I took the Blackhawk. There was some swapping that I did between the Blackhawk and the Charger. And no, in this one, I took the Charger. That's right. I took the Charger because there's a really cool thing that happens regarding this Charger that prevented me from getting max points in this game. And then I believe the Blackhawk and the Orion and the Martin. Maybe I dropped the Thunder. I'm not quite sure. I either dropped the Blackhawk or the Thunderer. I think I dropped the Thunderer because that Blackhawk, it has energy weapons and can jump and has a short range of 6. So game starts. I immediately get on all 3 of the objectives. And he does exactly what I thought he would have to do to get around that terrain. He had to do a lot of jumping and moving. And he just wasn't, he just didn't have enough. He had a lot of guns, but he just was not able to bring enough guns to bear to whittle down all of my fast stuff on the objective. So I was putting like at least 1, if not 2, sometimes 3 fast things on the objectives, depending on how much fire could be brought to bear. And then the next turn, I retreated all my flag runners back to the hill that was in front of my base. And then essentially I just sat behind the hill for like a turn or 2, which forced him to have to like come to me, allowed me to whittle him down a little bit. And then I cached the flags. And one of the reasons I cached the flags was because I had kind of cleared one side pretty well. And I was just going to bum rush that side with all my fast stuff, allow him to seize the other 2 flags. Once he seizes the flags, he's then going to have to withdraw those units from the battlefield, which means he's going to have even fewer guns coming to bear on the center. And then the plan was to run the 4th flag into the base and end the game with 4 points. That is not how it went, though, because Mark is a very good player, and he tried his darndest to absolutely stop my hovercraft and my fast stuff from scoring that 4th point. So he's got 2 points, and he's running back to his base. Now I'm worried that he's going to get back into the middle to grab 2 more flags. And what happened was I dumped all of my hovercraft onto the middle objective. He like killed one of them, and then I had 2 J. Edgars left, and all he had, I was like, he can't kill all of this, right? Like he can't kill all of it. One of these things is going to survive. Then I'm going to get back to my base. Then it's going to be game over because those J. Edgars can just get between the points in one turn. He ends up immobilizing one J. Edgar and then getting a emotive hit on a 10, which became an 11 on the other J. Edgar. So I was at 1 TMM and I ended up at 50% movement. So it was awful. Like I was moving 11, even at the sprint, I could not physically make it back to the base in one turn. And so the next turn, he was able to chase me down. He killed the J. Edgar. The J. Edgar dropped the flag. I then had to wait a turn to pick the flag back up with my Charger. The Charger ends up taking like an MP hit, picks up the flag, moves to within like an inch and a half of the base. I want to say it was like an inch and a half of the base. I needed one more turn for the Charger to then get onto the base to score. And then he headshot the Charger with like a mech that could do like 2 damage. It was an awesome game. It was so much fun. Like it came down to the wire and of me being able to score 4, and he did his absolute darndest to prevent me from scoring 4, even though like he knew, I think we both knew the game was in the bag. Like he was going to have a hard time like scoring 4 points before time because we were running out of time. And then at the very end, he like pops this assault mech in the head. I dropped the flag. And at that point I didn't I didn't personally have much less that could go back and pick the flag up in time. Like I was, he pretty much gutted me. And but I ended up winning the game 3-2. And Mark was a great opponent. If you ever get a chance to play Mark, I believe he was from the Chicago area. You should definitely meet up with him and play Mark. It was a lot of fun. At the end of that, I ended up still being in third place. So went into game 4, King of the Hill against Matt from Valhalla Club, and Matt was bringing just like a beefcake list, like some speed 8s and some speed 6 assault mechs. I think he had a blackjack, an Omni blackjack in there too, Stalker, Grasshopper. It was basically my list, but all TMM1. So it was a little slower, but it was throwing like buckets of dice. And we, it's capture the flag. So we all know how that game goes. It's not King of the Hill, or not capture the flag. We were playing King of the Hill. Sorry. We're playing King of the Hill. And there's never a hill in King of the Hill. There's always like a pit or a valley because everyone just builds up line of sight blocking so you can, as quickly as possible, get into the middle. The problem, though, was Matt's list was slower than my list, even though we were both big heavies in assault, like very assault and heavy. And so I was able to build a bigger double hill in front of Matt than he was able to build in front of me. This really slowed him down and prevented him from getting on. And then in addition to that, I was able to jump on a set of woods with my mechs, and he had, when I came around the corner of my double hill to get on the middle, and he came around the corner, and I had placed some like snow or mud, and he had like very little cover. So I was able to line up shots where he was TMM1 and he had very little cover coming into the button. And then I was able to take advantage of either being behind like a small hill or behind or in trees, right? In woods. And so I was team M2 plus the trees. So I'm a 3 defense essentially base, and he's a 1 or maybe a 2, depending on how line of sight is drawn. We both knew we couldn't just like YOLO into the middle and take hits. I was able to ping a hit on turn 1 with a Drillson, but then I had to like skedaddle out of there. And actually that Drillson worked really, really good. He not only like got into the middle and scored for me turn 1, but then I sent him in the rear of Matt's army to just be an annoyance, because I knew that he would have to. He did the same thing with a harasser, but the harasser just didn't do the damage. I think it was a laser harasser that did like 1-1, and my Drillson did 3-2. So Matt was putting 2 shots into the rears of my heavies, and I was trying to ignore the laser harasser because I wanted to kill his mechs to whittle down his size and weight for when he did go into the middle. And then I was doing the same, but like he's taking 4 shots to the rear, and that Drillson was just doing the Lord's work, as it were, doing Blake's work back there. And he could not ignore it. And because he couldn't ignore it, it ended up, there were times where he peeled off a mech to try to chase that thing down. And then those mech's guns were out of the fight, but he couldn't ignore it. Like it was just, he had no good decision, right? Is he either ignores the Drillson and goes after the stuff that's going to score, or he lets the Drillson do damage, or he goes after the Drillson and tries to kill it, but maybe he doesn't, and he lets me score, right? So it's a bad situation all the way around. We danced for like 4 turns and nobody went into the center because nobody wanted to get nuked off the board with a bunch of mechs that were throwing 5-6 damage at medium and short. But eventually he got whittled down, and I went into the middle, and then I got really disciplined about what I was willing to shoot at, so I could make sure that I scored 4 points over like the course of several turns. Once he was down to like, I think he had a Stalker and that laser harasser. Once he was down to that, I kind of like just let one unit live until I knew I was going to score 4 points. And then I finished him off, and he ended up being a 4-0 table. Matt's a really fun guy. If you don't listen to Valhalla Club, you absolutely should. It's one of my favorite Battletech Alpha Strike podcasts of all times. He was a great opponent. It was really fun. I think that just his list was just a little too slow and a little too heavy to get to the middle. And then he faced a list that was faster, but throwing just as many dice. And then I think if he jumped in those woods, like if he was playing on my side, because the woods were a little closer, if he was able to get into the woods instead of come up through this like little canyon I built, I think it would have made a big difference because he would have denied that to me. I don't know, what else he could have done. He did a really good job of focusing fire, of trying to knock mechs out. He certainly took out a ton of my mechs. I think he got like 163 MOV by the end of it. It was just, when I've got base defense 3 because of TMM 2 in the woods, and he's got base defense 1 or 2, like it's just a matter of time before the dice catch up to you. And I think that's really what happened in this game more than anything else. But it was still a really fun game. It was really good. Matt's a great opponent. He's really fun to just hang out with too. Like him and Bourbon and the guys from Colorado, Greg, are like some of the coolest gamers you'll ever meet. And they're so relaxed, but also like fun to play with. Like it's fantastic. So going into the last round, round 5, I ended up with that another 4-0, like I said, and I ended up in second place going into the last round. So round 5, I played against a guy named David. I apologize, David. I can't remember where you're from. Maybe Iowa, maybe Wisconsin. I just can't remember. I apologize. But we were playing bunkers, and he had a, like I would call it like a heavy sniper list. It had like a Marauder and a Warhammer that threw like 4 dice at long range. Each of them did that, and they were down to skill 2. And then he had like 2 Demolishers and an Annihilator and cruise missiles, aka skimmers, and if I remember right, he had 2 locusts that were skilled to 5. This was a pretty tough game. I will admit I'm not good at bunkers, and I really struggle with it. My list was originally it was 2 sniper teams: a Martin, a Swiftwind, Drillson, a Partisan, Orion, a Blackhawk, Thunder, and the Charger. But I moved some stuff around, and I ended up I think I put the Tunnel Rat in there if I remember right. Swap some units out here and there. So I ended up, the board was like this swamp board, and it had these big trees that were line of sight blocking. And my opponent, like right off the bat, he put a hill underneath the bunkers. So they were elevated up under this big hill. And then it was like, I don't really want to be up on an elevated hill like that, exposed when he's got all this sniper stuff, right? So what I did was I put another hill under the bunkers. So the bunkers were on a double hill, and it was like 2 big hills that were together. So basically there was like an 8-inch piece of line of sight blocking terrain right in the middle of the board. And my thought was I'd whittle him down and then jump up onto the hill to pop one of the bunkers with some of the infantry I brought. The bunkers were offset so that my bunker entrance was right up against the hill that they were on, and his had like maybe 2 inches, 3 inches before of space. And I thought, well, maybe the infantry is short enough they could get in there, and then he can't see up to it. And then we just had a smattering of this other, like these big trees and some hills on both sides that provided line of sight blocking and some coverage. There's probably a swamp in there too, but it didn't really come into play if I remember right. This game was crazy. Absolutely crazy game of bunkers. Like I said, I'm not great at bunkers to begin with, and I find it kind of a challenging mission for my play style. I just have a hard time like not throwing stuff away and like getting in position to destroy the bunkers. But right out of the gate, I believe he immobilized my Partisan and headshot my Thunder. Like opening moves within 2 turns. I'm like basically down 2 units because of all the line of sight blocking. The Partisan was like not in a great position and couldn't really see anything. And then he was just immobilized. So he's like easy to take a boatload of damage. And then the Thunder was absolutely fresh, and he just turned 1 with like a through armor crit with 2 damage, like blew it up. And so I had to kind of like rethink about my assault, because I definitely had the faster list and was starting out of the gate to put more pressure on him. I was trying to use that big hill to like isolate units and then engage with the majority of my force against like the minority of his force, like a smaller amount. And when that Thunder went down, I lost a lot of that initiative. When the Thunder and the Partisan effectively went down, I lost a lot of that initiative. And then he sent his 2 skimmers like into the back of units. And like, so not only were those things down, but like 2 of my other big like assault mechs had taken like 4 points of damage. So they were like not down to half, but like, close enough, 40% down. And so I was like, geez, this is brutal. And I thought we'd end up going to like a 0-0 tie, to be honest with you. And I just like couldn't quite put it together. He was also a super smart player and like wouldn't fall for any of my traps, but because his list was slow, he like, and my list was still pretty heavy. He couldn't like really get across the battlefield without getting beat up. And I think he knew that. He tried to like push his locusts up a flank, and that did not go well for the locust pilots. Um, so it really put me on the back foot. But because I took those like higher speed assault mechs that are like TMM2 speed 10, and I had a fair number of like hovercraft running in this list, and I had that helicopter, I was able to like push forward, take those hits, pull back, kind of maneuver around back there, rethink my approach, and then launch a second assault. And the second assault, when it came, I had finally thinned out like a demolisher and a couple of mechs. And when it came, he didn't have enough to like kill me outright and stop me from shooting one of the bunkers completely to pieces. And part of that was the two other bunkers were like the doors were exposed at this point. So I put these like junky infantry into them like on the same turn, which forced him with his remaining mechs. Like he had to fire at those. So he wasn't able to fire at my mechs because he had to clear those out. Otherwise, they were going in and popping the bunkers. And because he had to fire at the infantry, it's kind of like the infantry went in knowing they were going to die. But if they didn't, I was going to score. But because he had to fire at those, they weren't firing at the mechs. And because he wasn't firing at my mechs were able to get into position so that they could destroy one of the bunkers on the following turn. And so, but because of how the game went, where I made a push and then I had to come fall back and then I had to push again, like we just ended up running out of time and I scored. So I only scored 1 point to his 0 points, but it was a really tight game. Like it could have easily gone 0-0. And I think that if, I don't know how aggressive he could have gotten because he had them two demolishers and they were parked in his rear bunkers doors to stop people from coming in. And then Annihilator was super slow. I don't know that the Annihilator shot more than like twice in the whole game, maybe even once, because I think he was going to use it to protect bunker doors. And so he had it in the backfield. And I kind of saw that. And then I just was like, I'm not going to come out and face your Annihilator. I'm going to try to kill your Locusts. I'm going to try to kill your Warhammer and your Marauder. And then I'm going to come over. And then the three things you have left can fight me all they want. We ran out of time. I wasn't able to get more, but I don't know. It's if he would have been like more aggressive, I think he could have left those demolishers where they were with the Annihilator in support, or even left the one demolisher on one and the Annihilator on another, and then with the Locusts, the two sniper mechs, the cruise missile skimmers, and um, yeah, and then one of the other demolishers, I think he could have pushed up a side and probably made a good go at trying to knock out some bunkers. And it would have really put me in a bad position where I was having to defend against that while trying to go in against like a boatload of dice, which wouldn't have been fun. But ultimately, I ended up winning 1-0. So the guy who was in first place ended up losing his game, which meant I ended up being the only person to win 5 games, which meant I ended up winning the qualifier, which was pretty sweet. My wife, not serious but serious, is so proud of me. Actually, she's not, but kind of is. I don't know. My kids thought it was cool. But I won the qualifier, and I was super excited for that. However, I did have to drop because I committed to playing Saga doubles with a buddy, and I wasn't going to leave him hanging. So what was kind of neat about this was Mike Doyle, who's an awesome gamer, fun guy to have around at tournaments. He was in 9th place. He ended up qualifying, and he got into the tournament, and he ended up winning the whole thing, which is awesome. I just thought that was pretty neat. This list is awesome. Like, I think TMM2 heavy mechs are great, especially if they can dish like 15 or not 15, 5 points of damage for like around that like 40, 44, 45 point like limit, like the ones I have in this list. I think being able to bring like 4, 5 mechs like this, like I know that Ryan didn't have the TMM2, but we'll get to the Ryan here in a second. Like still had 5 points of damage for 38 points. Like it's pretty silly. And having 25 points of damage that you could basically take base in most of the missions coming out of those things is pretty bonkers. I think the downside is your inner sphere player playing one of the main houses. Like I think the Capellans might be the only ones who can do it. I haven't played around with like listing for all 5 of the major houses, but I know I've looked at a couple of them, and and I know Comstar and Word of Blake just don't have the access to that many TMM2 heavy mechs with that medium 5 output. All these mechs in the list, the other thing that was really nice was like, I don't know that I know I talked about a couple crits I took, but I didn't take a lot of crits because a lot of these mechs are like armor 7, structure 3. So like the turn that they start taking internals, like even if you take a crit, like you don't have to deal with it because you just die, right? Like you're just gone because you like only had 3 left. And so that was pretty good. It was nice to not have to deal with like as many um, crits as like you might normally take in a unit that's say 5/5 or 6/6 or 7/6 like armor structure. So that worked really well. And the speed and the TMM were, I mean, fantastic. I think the big like comparison I had was like my game against Mike, where he had basically a mirror list of heavy and assault mechs, but they're all TMM1. And like they were TMM1 and they had like a little bit more health, like they might have 12 or 13 health. But being TMM2 was just like it was like the factor that made a difference. Right? Like being able to move faster, having more board control, having more defense, like made these things more survivable than like your average like move 8 unit, and you could move around a lot more. So they were really good. That charger that I ran is like, I think it's low key like the best assault mech in the game, to be honest with you. Like it's got like just good all around balance, like across the board, points wise, movement wise. He's like super good. I really enjoyed him. And then that Orion was fantastic too. I don't think I ran into any helicopters or VTOLs in singles. I think I ran into like some in doubles. I was surprised. I thought there would have been more VTOLs in this game or in this tournament, but nobody really brought them. But the Orion I had, like, if I remember right, he threw 3 damage at long range. And I realized very quickly, if I just like opened the game with throwing 3 dice at long range, even if they didn't connect, people were like, oh my God, that Orion has to die. And then it allowed the other assault mechs to like move up and into position. And the Orion just like kind of walked behind them in support, like dropping 5 where it needed. And people oftentimes like prioritize taking out that Orion. Like I think of all the mechs I ran, I think the Orion died the most. And for the minimum number of little crits I took, I think he actually took the most crits. I think he spent half the time with like a fire control. I think at least in 2 or 3 games he took a fire control before he died. But he was just like so good. You know, and anything that involved like a center objective, that Orion was like all over. I would all 5 of these mechs I'd run again. The Jingao was great. The Blackhawk KU. This was really interesting. There were some games too, and I probably read my list wrong because I didn't make notes on what I swapped in and out at the last minute. But that Blackhawk KU is like short, and all these others were tall. And so there are actual games on mats where I was like, I'm going to swap the Thunder out for the KU, or I'm going to swap the KU out for the Thunder based off of how tall they were, because the KU is like a squat little like mech that you can like kind of hide better, right? Whereas like a lot of these other mechs were like stood up really tall and could shoot. The other thing I learned, Jadgers, they're the best hovercrafts in the game. I go back and forth with them because like I really like those hovercraft, like the Drillsons and Maxims that do 3, and their size 3 damage at short, and their size 2, and they have 6. But being moved like 24 with a TMM of 4 and a short of 2 is like just as good, if not better. Like the board control and the like threats you can do and the baiting you can do is so awesome. In that domination game, that thing like could not die. And I was like, I would take like 6 shots from like a skilled down unit at points in these games and just he would not die. And it was like, it was the best. Um, you know, and it's one of the, I'll say this, it's one of the few metal mechs or metal vehicles that you get from Iron Winds. It's cheaper than the plastic because they come in a 2-pack and they're like $7, $8 a piece at Aries. And if you don't shop at Aries, you absolutely should, because Derek's awesome. Anyways, that's how the tournament went. Really happy with the results. Really happy with all the guys who came out and the fun that we had. I mean, it was an excellent con all the way around. And hopefully you can make it either to Gen Con or KSAG or one of the other big events that WolfNet's doing. Or you can play games locally and let us know how games go in your own community. Hope you had a good weekend. And if you went to Gen Con, let me know in the comments and let me know how things went. Otherwise, may the blessings of Blake be upon you.